From the European Parliament in Brussels, this is Raw Politics. Thanks for joining us. This is what we have for you on the program. Brexit, bold Brexit, referendum promises, and Theresa May troubles as the UK Prime Minister tries to sell a new plan. Far-right fakes, the rampant spread of misinformation and disinformation, according to a new report. Populist opposition, why one author says the far-right could be the counterforce the European Parliament needs. LGBT-free, Polish towns reject the spread of so-called LGBT ideology in a bitter EU election campaign. And prop politics, an Irish MEP uses a hurl to deliver his election message in tonight's Raw Moment. All right, it's time to meet our panelists this evening. We have Darren McCaffrey, our political editor here at Euronews. OK, Darren, what story are you watching tonight?
I think actually it's the LGBT story from Poland. And actually it's not just reflected in Poland. We've seen it in the last couple of months in England as well. And it's a reminder that I think that for all the talk about kind of liberalised Europe, that actually issues like this about same-sex marriage and same-sex relationships and schools are still divisive in many conservative parts of Europe, and people feel that their politicians aren't necessarily reflecting those views.
So a good conversation will come out of that. All right, also joining us, Shada Islam. She's Director of Europe and Geopolitics at Friends of Europe, a think tank. Hi, Shada. So what story are you watching tonight?
Populist as the opposition in the European Parliament, the rise of populists in Europe, the far right especially. I've been watching it very carefully for the last few years, and I'm curious to see if all the bluff that they're saying, you know, how they're going to win many more votes and the role they're going to play, erode Europe from within. I'm curious to see if that really happens.
They can walk the talk if this is all talk.
Can
all right.
they?
Also joining us tonight, Jane Gimber. She is a communications and policy strategist at Fleischman Hillard Consultancy. What about you, Jane? What are you watching tonight?
I'm watching the bold Brexit story tonight, following Theresa May's revisited plan from yesterday and the outlook for the next 6 months and what it means for the EU27.
Absolutely. That is exactly where we are starting tonight, because Theresa May, she has played her final card in a desperate bid to get her Brexit deal over the line. And the backlash has been swift and brutal. Her new 10-point plan seems to have alienated her own party while failing to bring new Labour MPs on board. Now, she had to present her plan to Parliament earlier today, and it received quite a reception. Let's take a listen.
In the end, our job in this House is to take decisions, not to duck them. So I will put those decisions to this House, because that is my duty, and because it is the only way that we can deliver Brexit. So let's demonstrate what this House can achieve. Let's come together, honour the referendum, deliver what we promised the British people, and build a successful future for our whole country.
Throughout the last 3 years, she's made no attempt to unite the country. She's been focused only on keeping her divided party together, and it hasn't worked.
What does she say to those millions of angry Leave voters who do not see the agreement as any kind of Brexit, but a lock-in for many, many months with no clear way out?
The Prime Minister must know that the only way now to break the deadlock, which, as today's terrible news at British Steel shows, is damaging our economy, is to put the choice back to the British people.
Absolutely right. Isn't it a fact that the deal itself hasn't changed? The treaty is as it is, and these are a series of domestic legislative provisions to try to mitigate what is, in some cases, a very bad deal.
OK, let's go to London now, where our correspondent Tig Enright is standing by for us. Tig, can you bring us up to speed with what's happening? Where are we now with Theresa May's big, bold Brexit plan?
Well, interesting, Tessa, to hear you describe it as her final card. The sense here is that the end of the game could be coming sooner than we even thought yesterday. Today was supposed to be the day when she made her last big pitch to save Brexit, to encourage MPs to get behind her withdrawal agreement bill. But a lot of attention paid to the significant gaps in her own government's benches, both on the backbench and on the front bench too. Notably, some very pro-Leave ministers certainly weren't there at the beginning of the statement, and the front page page of the London Evening Standard newspaper here today, which incidentally is edited by the former finance minister. The former Chancellor George Osborne talks about a cabinet coup being underway. So to get a sense of what could be happening behind us here in the Houses of Parliament, or perhaps in a pizza restaurant elsewhere, I'm joined by the Liberal Democrat MP, Alistair Carmichael. Alistair, what's your sense about what is actually going on right now?
Well, I think it's pretty unclear at the moment, but what is clear and has been clear for weeks now is that Theresa May is a Prime Minister without any authority. And you've been able to watch as the Tory party in the House of Commons has collapsed from the outside edges in. So it started on the backbenches, it grew on the backbenches, it then went into the junior ministerial ranks, and it now looks as if it is reaching the cabinet. So, frankly, this should have happened months ago. The Tories have been negligent in allowing Theresa May to continue because it's pretty clear that there is going to be no way through this mess while she remains Prime Minister.
But it's also pretty clear that there's every chance a hard Brexiteer could replace her, and goodness knows in what direction they would try to steer this process. Is that something that worries you?
Frankly, it doesn't really matter who leads the Conservative Party or who is Prime Minister. What matters is that whoever is in that job, and indeed others in Parliament today, have to accept that Parliament and government have failed in this, and when Parliament and government fail, the only way of resolving an issue of this sort is to put it back to the people. We have to have a people's vote. I think actually if you had a free vote in the House of Commons, you would get a majority for that tomorrow.
And interesting, that was the gesture that she did make yesterday, saying that if MPs were to ratify the withdrawal agreement bill, then they'd also get the opportunity to vote on holding a second referendum. I know it wasn't everything that people who want a people's vote want to see happen, but she was meeting you some of the way. Could you help her at this stage? Is it in your interest, actually, to help her if it means avoiding no deal?
As Liberal Democrat Chief Whip, I have already told the Conservative Chief Whip, who presumably has also told the Prime Minister, that we are prepared to vote for her deal if it is attached to a people's vote. Now, there is a way that she could do this, and it would have been the big, bold gesture that she was talking about before the speech yesterday. She could bring forward a bill that included a people's vote, say, I don't really believe in this. You know, she could say that this is not what she wants, but that in order to free up the logjam, that she would do that. Now, only she as Prime Minister can do that. And if she then wants to make the case for taking it out at later stages, then let her try. But she wasn't prepared even to do that. She doesn't have either the political or the emotional range to deal with this.
Okay, Alistair Carmichael, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us today. So, you know, even as of this morning, some people were saying that this today could be Theresa May's final Prime Minister's questions. I have to say, although it's not a science, there's an atmosphere here that something is afoot. So naturally, stay tuned with us here on Euronews. We'll bring you all the updates. Back to you now in Brussels, Tessa.
All right, thanks for that, Taig and Mr. Carmichael there. Okay, Shada, I'll go to you first in terms of trying to analyse what just happened there. When Theresa May tried to get this through a fourth time, I mean, surely she must have thought, she must have had a plan, like something is going to change. You don't just do this for the sake of doing it. So what was the thinking behind putting it to a fourth vote?
So, Tessa, who knows what goes on in her mind? I mean, she's a stubborn lady. She keeps going back to the parliament. She's been defeated 3 times. She's hoping that this time it'll go through. She's giving, temptations, incentives to the others to come on board. But I think she really has to make up her mind now and go for the second referendum. I've been saying that for now almost 2 years. Let's go back and take it to the people again. And I think the Lib Dems are on the right track when they say that. But the thing is, it's holding us back. Us to EU27, and what I really want is this to be resolved. Stay in, for God's sake, stay in. But if you're leaving, get it done. You know, it's holding us back on so many geopolitical issues. I mean, it's sad.
We touched on this yesterday, Darren, about Theresa May being the one selling it. The problem is it's Theresa May who's trying to sell the plan. From a communications point of view, what does she keep doing wrong that she can't seem to sell whatever plan she has in her hand?
I think it's difficult to know the next steps. And one of the issues that Theresa May faced from the beginning is to negotiate with the EU27 and to understand really from Europe's perspective what is it that they want. And therefore, what she brings to the table needs to be a negotiation which takes that into account as well. So she is running out of time now. If we look at the EU27 perspectives, they will want to make sure that they preserve their political and economic well-being, particularly when we've got a year of change coming up and change in the institutions with the Parliament, the Commission and the Council. And that needs to be taken into account.
Okay, so what do you make of this, Darren? Because we're talking about the fast-moving developments in London today. Okay.
Yeah, indeed. And one Tory MP has tweeted in the last couple of minutes that although it's only the 22nd, it looks like it is the end of May. And I think Tag kind of touched on it there quite well, is that there is an atmosphere, I think, in London. Theresa May cut a very lonely figure in the House of Commons today. And this evening, there's lots of rumours flying around about cabinet ministers prepared to go in and say that they have essentially lost her support now. Or if not even at that stage, the 1922 committee, which is the governing body of the Conservative Party, will essentially change the rules so that Theresa May will face a vote of confidence, something that at the moment she can't do until December. And I think in part this is because they have now realised that despite Theresa May's attempt to bring a fourth deal, this fourth essentially attempt to get legislation through Westminster, is that it really just does not pertain the support, not just of opposition, but indeed of most probably of her own MPs at this stage. And in those circumstances, where do they go to next? Because tomorrow, you know, there's elections in the UK in which they look like the Conservative Party is going to get absolutely hammered.
Let's not forget it's happening before, the day before that.
We keep talking about kicking the can down the road.
Yeah.
Theresa May has now run out of road entirely. Well, she's got nowhere else to go.
OK, well, let's look at recent polls first. It suggests that the Brexit chaos might be very bad news for the UK's two main parties in the upcoming EU election. So let's take a look at the most recent YouGov poll. The new Brexit party is way out in front on 37%. The Liberal Democrats are in second place at 19%. The main opposition party, the Labour Party, they are at 13%, while the ruling Conservative Party, they're just at 7%. OK, for some more analysis from the UK, we're joined by independent British MEP Stephen Wolfe in Winchester. Stephen, very good to see you there. You know, what do you make of what's happening in Westminster, very fast developing ones? Is this really, has the end of May come early?
I believe it is. And this was not a 10-point bold plan for Brexit, but it was a desperate, deceitful and divisive plan that is backfiring tremendously on Theresa May. Firstly, I think now we're going to see the sad demise of her political career, but with it, she's actually dragging down the Conservative Party. Not only have you seen the way that the Conservative Party is now 7% in the polls for the European elections, which could mean that they will get no MEPs, but the fight between members of the House of Lords and members of Parliament, where you have Lord Tebbit saying, I will vote for the Liberal Democrats, and you will have Andrea Jenkins, a strong Brexiteer MP, saying, I will vote for the Brexit Party. And on Twitter, fights between MPs arguing with one another. This is a party in complete chaos, and the chaos is caused by Theresa May and her really damaging method of trying to get Brexit through, which everybody knows isn't Brexit anyway.
All right, Stephen, going to the other end of the spectrum, doing very well in this, in the poll that we just saw, is the Brexit Party. You know, you've worked with Nigel Farage, you know him quite well, but the Brexit Party didn't even bother to come up with a manifesto. Is Farage the man with a plan in this?
Well, he has a very clear message, and that clear message, as your previous communications officer said, has to be clear to the voters, and that is, if you vote for the Brexit Party, we are the party that's going to force the two mainstream parties to reconsider and vote for Brexit, whereas the Liberal Democrats have done the opposite. They have a clear message that says vote for us and we will deny Brexit, we will overturn the referendum. And that's why both of those are doing very well. And you don't need to have a manifesto for the European elections. Why would you? No political party can actually push through any of their ideas, even if they won all the seats in their nation state. It's all done by the Commission anyway, and they would have to have some dreamlike idea as manifestos. He has a clear message. That message is resonating with millions of people, and 37% will see a tremendous number of MEPs coming into the European Parliament, which will cause problems on the numbers when it comes to the overall projection of MPs. You could have 200 Eurosceptics, which is a big problem, for the business, the daily business of the Parliament going forward.
All right, and that message clear in even the choice of name. Thank you for that, Stephen Wolf, an independent MEP there. Okay, Jane, I'll go to you when we look at the polls and what it would mean for voting and how people would vote. What is your interpretation of that poll that we just saw?
I think it shows the polarisation of the politics that exist in the UK at the moment. I think it will be very interesting to see what that means from a European Parliament perspective when the elections take place over the weekend. And it shows that there's no real clear path forward as well. And that's what we've seen with Theresa May trying to put the deal on the table for the fourth time. There is no majority agreed on the way forward. Mm-hmm. So it will be interesting to see what comes of this weekend.
OK, and Shada, what do you think of that? Because, the Tories doing really badly.
Yeah, right. And, we're blaming Theresa May throughout this for her, how she's mismanaged, and she has. But it hasn't been made easy for her by the likes of Boris Johnson either, or Jacob Rees-Mogg. And those two guys get away with it scot-free. Boris Johnson could be, the next Prime Minister of the UK. But so she gets all the blame, whereas, she's been trying really hard. I mean, she's been stubborn, but you can't just blame her. And I think that's a bit unfair. She's been called a dead woman walking from day 2 of Brexit, if you like, So, but there's that. And the other thing I want to say is Brexit Party, Nigel Farage, is entangled in some of the worst financial and moral scandals, political scandals at the moment, right? Teflon coated, everything just goes off, nothing sticks. And that, people who are voting for Brexit Party, sure, they're probably, sort of enchanted by him and sort of mesmerised. But what about the others? There has to be some kind of a pushback against this, because these people are really working with the enemies of Europe to try and undermine Europe from within. These things just get lost in translation.
Right, OK. Just to move this forward a little bit, what would, if Boris Johnson does take the helm, what does that look like for Brexit and for the Parliament here?
A few things. First of all, on the allegations, and they are just allegations against Nigel Farage, clearly nothing has been proven thus far, though there are investigations, not least of all in this Parliament, looking into the financial conduct of him and indeed the Brexit Party. I think that, first of all, also just on Theresa May, I mean, she has been the maker of her own downfall in some ways. She has lost the narrative about what Brexit is. It's really interesting what Stephen Wolf was trying to say. He said, well, it's not Brexit anyway. Well, many people would disagree with that point, but the whole point is that actually that argument is won out. Essentially, the Brexiteers arguing that Theresa May's deal is not Brexit has trumped Theresa May's argument that her deal delivers Brexit. And she, in part, is responsible for that because she, of course, is the Prime Minister who, for 2 years, talked about how no deal was better than a bad deal and that Brexit needed to be red,
yes, if
white
you have a hard
blue.
Brexiteer at the helm, then what?
So in regards to what Boris Johnson will bring to this game, well, fundamentally, potentially nothing, because ultimately the fundamentals of Brexit have not changed, i.e. there is not support in Parliament for a no-deal Brexit. The arithmetic is not likely to have changed on that. It is unlikely, even though Boris Johnson, I assume, will try to come back to Brussels to get what he would perceive a better deal, that Brussels will budge at all on that. And then, of course, MPs calling for a second referendum will still exist. So in many regards, a change of leadership won't fundamentally change the Brexit process. Just very quickly, because obviously things are moving this evening. We say Theresa May's run out of road. It might well not happen over the next 24 hours. One cabinet minister telling colleagues in London that it is the end of the line for the Prime Minister, and he will tell her that. But another says that she might well see through to Monday after the election results come through. And another saying that actually she must stay because actually her going will make no difference. So things are fast moving, but
indeed.
it is still potential that nothing might happen over the next 24 hours. Overall, though, it is the end of the line, as in a month, she will still, in theory, have announced she's going to go.
Everything fast-moving, but we'll leave Brexit there for the moment. OK, let's move on, because according to a new report, a web of far-right Facebook accounts have been spreading fake news and divisive content to millions of people across Europe ahead of the parliamentary elections. And Alex and our team in theCUBE have been looking into this. Alex, what have you found?
Tessa, in Spain, there was posts like this claiming Catalan separatists were closing down children's hospitals in order to promote and keep their embassies open. In Poland, it was the claim that migrant taxi drivers were raping women. They shared an image from a Polish film claiming it was breaking news. In Italy, similar story there. They shared a clip from a film which they claimed showed migrants smashing up a police car. These are just 3 of the examples of webs, networks of disinformation, which the online activist group Avaz claim Europe has been drowning in over the last few months. Let's bring you a quick breakdown of their report. Well, they say they uncovered networks, far-right networks, in 6 countries working ahead of the election. We had 3 of them there, but also the United Kingdom, Germany and France as well. They say the pages that they flagged roughly had been seen around 533 million times. They say that was over a 3-month period. Now, they claim this is all part of coordinated, inauthentic activity aiming to push what they say is anti-immigration, anti-EU messages ahead of polling day. Now, of course, this report, you can read the full report online. It is obviously controversial in its findings in as far as that focus on the far right. So I spoke to Christoph Schott. Now, he is the campaign policy director at Avaz. You see him here in his disinformation communication centre. They've set this up saying you can't only trust Facebook to monitor their platforms. So I asked him, look, is it just the far right you've been seeing? What about claims of the far left and other political groups as well? This is what Christoph had to say to me.
Yes, so we always started with fact-check disinformation and looked who are the biggest sharers of these kind of content, and then looked deeper and went down the rabbit hole. And truth be told, most of the times we ended up very clearly on the far right. But in Italy, for example, a lot of the pages that Facebook has taken down were 5-star supporting, right? They're populist as well, but they're not far right. So in this case, we didn't look specifically for the far right, but in a strong majority of the cases, the stuff that we found and those networks that are built, they are strongly far right, and they're up for years and years and have spread this type of content to our people.
And that is what Christoph had to say there. We've reached out to Facebook at the time of us talking now. Facebook haven't got back to us, but having said to other media, they recognise the work this group has done, taking down a number of the pages. What can we do, I asked Christoph, to defend ourselves ahead of polling day? He said to me, be careful. Look at the sources of what you are seeing. Be aware this kind of activity ratchets up ahead of polling day, saying citizens, we as citizens have a duty to be aware we might be being manipulated as well.
All right, thank you for that, Alex, and our team in the Cube. Jane, I'll go to you, communications expert there. This has been a worry of the EU for a long time going into these elections. All right, just when someone sees a piece of news, as you as a communications expert, what makes you immediately say, all right, there's something really wrong with this?
I think a lot of it is instinctive. If it doesn't seem to be right what you're reading, then you need to question it. And this is the whole purpose, I think, of the movement and the increase around fake news, is that we need to question more. That's not the reason why it's there, but it's the reaction that we need to have.
So the onus is on people rather than maybe the platforms or the networks?
I think the onus is on both.
Okay.
I think the onus is certainly on platforms and networks to make sure that there is a certain sense of fact-checking that goes on as far as they can do. Mm-hmm. But then I also think ultimately it's the people that are voting these elections. So it's the people that also need to question what they're reading if it doesn't seem right.
OK, just very, very quickly, how worried should the EU be right now, just a day before voting starts?
Yeah, very worried. Okay. Very worried about the fake news and disinformation, but also encouraged that Avaz and others, many others out there, are actually doing their job. And I think media literacy, what you were saying, Jane, very important for all of us. Be careful. Be cautious.
Yeah.
Don't be gullible.
So that's the message there. Be careful. All right. With campaigning now ramping up across the board ahead of Sunday's elections, Europe's corporate heavyweights are jumping on board. That and more in today's Ballot Buzz. Europe's big businesses are on an all-out marketing mission recently, giving the continent's voters an extra push to the polls. Worried an anti-EU outcome could be a commercial blow, they've rolled out a bundle of pro-EU ad campaigns, like Lufthansa's Say Yes to Europe and Volkswagen's Votes Europe, hoping to steer the bloc back in their favor. Poland is waging war on its LGBT community, targeting them at home, in schools, and at work. Local towns are passing regulations to restrict the spread of what they say is non-traditional ideology, taking aim at things like same-sex education in schools.
Można powiedzieć, że przeciwny jestem temu. Normalnie powinien żyć.
Hoping to capitalize on the anger of rural voters, it's become a key issue ahead of Sunday's elections.
Wydaje mi się, że Prawo i Sprawiedliwość zawsze potrzebuje jakiegoś wroga. Kiedyś to byli imigranci, uchodźcy, teraz to są osoby...
But will it backfire? A recent poll shows the majority of people in Poland disagree with the government stance. This week hasn't been the best for Europe's chief Eurosceptic, Nigel Farage. First, he was drenched in milkshake. Now he's being investigated for failing to declare over €500,000 worth of gifts given to him in part by the Brexit bank folder Aaron Banks, leaving him in a familiar situation, head-to-head with Parliament Chief Antonio Tajani, who's leading the investigation. All right, Shala, you said you loved that story about private companies jumping on the bandwagon in EU messaging. What is that about, though? Is that about the bottom line? What is this? These are businesses, though, we have to remember.
These are businesses, but increasingly the private sector in Europe is becoming very involved and engaged with the European Union story. It's not just about the single market. Of course, the single market is enormous, like 500 million people, and you reach them. But also, I think, a sense of responsibility towards the European project, towards the European Union, the values of the European Union, and I find that really heartening. I see it within Europe, but I see also the private sector engaged in Africa, in Asia, on, projects that they were not looking at, to do with women, to do with school children. The private sector realizes it's not just about the money, it also has to be about the values. And I like that.
It's a noble cause now. All right. Shala's very positive about it.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, I think private sector has a role to play in our societies. They're part of us, right?
Okay. All right. Now you can join Euronews for our special edition, special coverage, that is, this Sunday from 6 p.m. at Brussels time. And we'll give you all the very latest news and the best analysis from our team here in Brussels and our correspondents across Europe. So do stay tuned for that. Okay, and coming up on the program, now we visit the Netherlands for the home stretch of the Euronews election road trip. Plus, does the European Parliament need populists? We speak to an author who thinks so. He's coming next.
We need a solid bloc of liberal people who will stand firm against the rise of xenophobia, populism, sometimes outright racism and fascism that we're now getting across Europe.
Welcome back to the program. That was UK Liberal Democrats leader Vince Cable. He was warning against the rise of populism at a campaign event. Now, despite the constant cautioning from centrist politicians across the EU, anti-establishment parties are projected to make gains in this year's elections, and that would be an outcome the European Parliament needs. In fact, that's according to Dutch historian and author Luc van Middelaar, and he's joining us now live from Luxembourg. All right, Luc, can you tell us why you think that populists are in fact the opposition that the Parliament needs, your words?
Well, the Parliament has always been a very consensual body and is very proud of it. But in fact, a Parliament should not only act as a legislator making laws, it is also a representative body. It should make different people's voices heard. And it has been so consensual that it has sometimes forgotten this role, the role of public agora, of place where you can see fight and debate and skirmishes between parties and factions people can relate to. And in this respect, the populist, I'm talking, of course, about the nationalist right. I don't talk about Nazi parties, let's be clear about that. These parties represent a different opinion on certain matters, which for perhaps 1/3 or a bit less of the voters is important to be heard. And if their voice is not there in Europe,
yeah, we already see a bit of that, though, in the Parliament. We already do see, a bit of that. We have some Eurosceptics, definitely. We have Brexiteers in Parliament. Is that not enough, though? You don't think it's enough?
Well, I think the new generation that will come in now, the generation of Salvini and Orban, will be different from their predecessors, let's say, generation of Le Pen and Farage, because these people are in government in Italy and in Budapest, and they will really want to have a say, they want to have an influence on legislation, on issues like asylum and migration, which is going to be key in the next political cycle. And they will not only use the parliament, like the Marine Le Pen kind of parties, to make nice films on YouTube or to use the parliament as a cash cow for their own political constituencies back home. So that will be a proper change. And the paradox is, the way I see it, is it can make the parliament as a public agora, as a place of continental debate, more credible. So it's not just the Brussels parliament, people who like the EU, but it represents all voices and the whole of public opinion.
Okay.
And that makes the parliament stronger.
And finally, Luke, you said also that the EU should get rid of some of its taboos. What do you mean? What taboos?
Well, one thing I mentioned with that is the taboo of discussing your external border. Okay, where is Europe going to stop? The issue of Turkey, the issue of Ukraine, these kind of matters have been always...
So you mean sensitive topics, difficult topics?
Difficult topics, topics of culture, topics of national interest. They have been put under the carpet for decades for a very good reason, because the European Union was kind of very fragile plant. But today, in my view, and I'm rather optimistic about it, I don't think the situation is that dramatic. The European Union is very much part of our societies, of our lives, and it can handle a bit of criticism, and that will make it, and can handle a bit of frank talking about the fact that we will never, that Turkey will never be a member state, for instance, and it can still be part of our debates and
all right, so
and
engaging in more debate is your point there. All right, thank you very much, Luc van Middelaar there. And we are going to be debating that. So joining us in the set now is Esther Zalan. She's a reporter with the EU Observer. And still with us, Shada Islam, director at Friends of Europe, and our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Do you guys agree with what Luc was saying, that in fact we need the populists here? Esther, you've been covering populism a lot.
Yes, and I also interviewed Luc on this. I think he has a very good point that it will be more of a reflection of what politics, what's the political space today in Europe is. And I think people will feel that it's not, or will experience that it's not only the Brussels elite or the Brussels
What about those people who say, oh, you give them too much of a platform? You know, there are those that argue, oh, stop giving them a platform.
I would argue with that, in terms of like Macron or Mark Rutte tonight debating with a far-right leader, the position, mainstream politicians positioning themselves as they're the only ones, and then there's the far-right. I think that's a dangerous simplification. Mm-hmm. But these parties are definitely coming up and represent 15-20% of the electorates in some member states. So they obviously have a place in a democratic institution.
And in terms of debate and engaging in debate, is there a line when he said get rid of taboos? Is there a line though that we should draw where there is, where it's dangerous to cross because you're giving it a lot more attention? Or let's talk it out.
I think there is a line, and I think Luc mentioned it as well. I mean, there are neo-Nazi and neo-fascist parties there, anti-Semitic, Islamophobic. I mean, these are lines. If you're a hate monger, if you're preaching violence and you're preaching against, communities and races and religion, I think that is a line. Euroscepticism, welcome to talk about it. Mm-hmm. Borders of Europe, welcome to talk about it. But if you're really turning into a neo-Nazi and asking for the extermination, of races and religions, that is a line
which breaks laws as well. Sure,
that breaks laws, and that is really against the fundamental values. Now, can I just say, we've just seen the far right in Austria, which was part of the system. Sebastian Kurz, the Austrian Prime Minister, was very proud of having tamed his far right, and he was actually saying to the other EU leaders, guys, do like I do, But we've seen the dangers because this kind of far right is actually colluding, and I think the allegations of collusion, you cannot deny them, with powers that have an interest in destroying Europe. So I'd like to see this debate. I want this agora. Yeah. I want these discussions, but I think our values and those who believe in our values will have to be challenged and stay firm on their points of view as well. It's going to put the challenge to
just to pick up on that, then, how do you deal with racism, Islamophobia? Do you just say, like, it doesn't exist?
No, you do discuss it, but you don't discuss it necessarily with the hate mongers. You have to talk to the people. Look, I am born a Muslim and I am not white. If these people are insulting me and calling for my disappearance from Europe as a European, I take offense at that and I will take them to court for it. So these are the kinds of things we have to do.
But isn't this the constant problem, though, is that, yeah, of course, there are laws in place, and rightly so, to prevent hate speech. But how do you deal with a problem in which potentially a growing number of Europeans are not just concerned about migration,
it's conversations on culture, on society, and
openly racist and openly Islamophobia? I'm asking the question: is it better then to shut them out and say they cannot be part of this?
I didn't say that. I think there are lines to be respected when it comes to real hate mongering and violence mongering. If they're calling for the extermination of people, which some of them are, but I think that is the bottom line. But also, these people haven't really engaged in a dialogue with people like me. They haven't. They stayed away. They haven't been questioned. They haven't been, they haven't been accountable.
Yeah, this sort of
agora. Very quickly on the feeling of us and them. I think that's what you're getting at. The feeling of that exists in Europe. That we are one community, and then there are others who are trying to get into our culture. So how is that supposed to be dealt with? Just very quickly.
I think the agora will be good for that as well. The mainstream parties will also have to learn how to answer those questions and how to deal with that. So I think it will be a good exercise on both, and call people out who are inciting for violence, call people out who are just making up data or presenting their vision of the truth as facts. So I think it will give an opportunity for those who want to protect the EU as an open and
absolutely
law-based
as Luke was saying, just a bit
society.
more diversity in voices in Europe. All right, coming up on Raw Politics, religion, sex and morality are dominating Poland's election battleground topics that we were talking about. Why are gay rights suddenly front and center in the country's campaign? We want to hear what you think on tonight's Your Call and how to get in touch. It's all going to be coming up very soon. Welcome back to the program. Now, as part of our European election coverage, we took a road trip across Europe to find out what really matters to voters. Now, we started that journey in Portugal in March, and we traveled across 14 countries in 10 weeks. Now, on the last leg of this trip, our very own Maeve McMahon drove from Maastricht in the Netherlands to the Belgian city of Ninove, and that's where she is joining us now from. So, Maeve, you were in the Netherlands yesterday. What did you find out?
Well, I found out that the word Nexit is very popular in some parts of the Netherlands. Last night we were in Krijke. It is a town on the border, just a couple of kilometres away from Germany. And people there, well, they really do not like the EU. They feel a real mistrust and dislike towards Brussels. They believe that politicians there, commissioners, members of the European Parliament and EU staffers earn way too much money. And they also feel that the European Union is a little bit too big for their liking. Now, I also spoke to a first-time voter. He was a pizza delivery boy. He just got a new job in Domino's that literally just opened yesterday, and he was pretty chuffed with his electric bike that he was testing out for the first time. He also told me that he will be voting for the Forum for Democracy. Now, that's a conservative nationalist party that denies climate change and that also believes that the Netherlands is just too full and too diverse. And he told me that he just is not in favour of multiculturalism.
Okay, so what is next on the trip there, Maeve? You're going to continue that as you make your way across to Belgium?
Well, absolutely. I'm on my way gradually to Brussels. This morning we woke up in Maastricht, which is a student town. The town, of course, that back in 1992 paved the way towards more European integration and, of course, the euro, that common currency. After that, we headed to Liège in Wallonia, where we spoke to a lot of people who said they were just voting because it's obligatory here in Belgium, but that they believe in their eyes that politicians don't do much and don't really change things for them. And now we're on Ninove. We're just right in the middle of Ghent and Brussels, so we're here in Belgium. And the reason we're here, Tessa, well, back in October 2018 in local elections, Vlaams Belang, or Forza Ninove, the far-right xenophobic party, did very, very well. So we'll be spending some time with those voters and find out why they believe there's too much diversity here in Ninove.
Thank you for that, Maeve McMahon there, who's on the last leg of our road trip. All right, now hundreds of millions of people in 28 countries will go to the polls in the next 4 days. And our correspondent, Elena Cavallone, she went to Italy to speak to someone who is going to vote for the first time.
Sono Bernard, ho 20 anni e studio giurisprudenza qui all'Università degli Studi di Firenze e sono felice quest'anno di poter votare per la prima volta alle elezioni europee. Io sono arrivato in Italia nel 1999, circa un anno da quando ero nato in Albania, e sono venuto qua da immigrato, da extracomunitario, e da lì è partita il percorso di integrazione fino a quando, dopo 17 anni, sono potuto diventare cittadino italiano a tutti gli effetti. Sto girando un po' le scuole Italia per stimolare i giovani a partecipare, ad impegnarsi, a non arrendersi, perché noi siamo nati e abbiamo trovato l'Europa. Cioè è una cosa scontata, dobbiamo considerare quello che ha fatto sì che in Europa, insomma nei paesi che fanno parte della comunità europea, ci sono stati 70 anni di pace. E la storia ci insegna che questo non era mai successo prima. Ecco, l'Europa già solo per questo dovrebbe bastare. La nostra generazione non è tanto la generazione del futuro, sì, sicuramente lo sarà, ma è la generazione del presente. Ed è il presente l'unico tempo che ci è stato dato per cambiarle le cose.
All right, joining us to discuss this, we have Brian McGuire, reporter and broadcaster at Euractiv, and still with us, Shada Islam and Darren McCaffrey. Okay, Brian, I'll go to you for this one. First-time voter, young person. I mean, if Europe's voting age were lower, and would it impact actually the result? And is there a generational divide, pretty much?
I think there is, but I think you still risk losing that generation if you don't win hearts and minds with the right arguments. And the Democrats are accused of this in America. Stop complaining about President Trump and win the arguments. We have to do the same in Europe. We have to stop complaining about the populists, and we have to take the arguments to the localities, to the places where these issues are not well understood. The complexity of the issues are just overlooked and simplified too much. And we have to take a long-term perspective on this. We can't expect this to turn around in 5 years or even 10 years. But if we don't begin engaging properly and stop complaining about populists, then we're going to lose this argument regardless.
Very quickly, you think young people care enough in Europe?
I think they don't care enough. I think they're too complacent, and I think they're too accommodated because they have taken this for granted.
All right, well, let's leave it at that now. Coming up, what is your #1 election issue? We want you to call in and tell us what's getting you off the couch and to the polling stations. Your call is coming up at 7 p.m. at Brussels time. And that contact information, there you go. You can call us at 00800 3333 700 to get in on the debate. Use the hashtag #RawPolitics, and our lines are opening soon after the break.
Will May's new offer on Brexit change anything? What do you reckon?
It's going to make no difference whatsoever, and I'm more determined than ever to get out.
We've got Gary from Berkshire on the line.
I think people are fed up with Brexit. They've had enough. They just want it to be over.
Just very finally, Robert, who would you like to see as the next Prime Minister? Who would you like to see take over from Mrs May?
I really don't like Boris Johnson as a person, so not particularly him, to be honest. And I don't really like Jeremy Corbyn either, so...
Do you think a Boris Johnson premiership, or indeed...
Don't mention Boris Johnson as any idea of improvement. If Boris Johnson, it would be a disaster.
So those were last night's highlights from your call, and we're doing it again, all over again tonight. The usual time is 7 p.m. Brussels time and 6 p.m. if you are in the UK and Ireland. I will be hosting tonight, and with me it will be Esther Zalan from the EU Observer and Brian McGuire from Euractiv tonight. Okay, Darren, let's introduce our topics. What are we talking about?
Yeah, I think we're talking about a range of topics again this evening, not least of all this controversy that we've seen in Poland and England about same-sex marriage and same-sex relationship, but also, as this is the last day of campaigning really in lots of parts of Europe, what is the big election choice for you? Let's look at tonight's hot topics. Gay rights suddenly front and centre in Poland. Dominating the election battlegrounds, in rural towns, councils are voting to go, quote, LGBT-free. Politicians from the ruling Law and Justice Party want to ban same-sex education in schools.
Przede wszystkim widzimy kwestie dotyczące wychowania seksualnego, kwestie płciowości, kwestie wchodzenia ideologów.
Over in the UK, several communities are also fighting to ban LGBT issues from the sex education curriculum. Is it up to the parents, or should schools be teaching kids about same-sex relationships? For many Italian voters, migration is top of the agenda. The Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini wants to fine NGOs caught saving lives at sea, proposing €5,500 fines for each migrant. The NGOs have called this plan a declaration of war. Out of the 17,000 people making the crossing this year alone, nearly 500 have died. But Salvini says defending the homeland is a sacred duty. we're asking you, is Salvini right to fine NGOs? Voting starts tomorrow for France's Yellow Vest protesters. An end to economic anxiety and elitism is what they want. For others, the fears of uncapped migration overshadows everything else. For many Brits, it's Brexit, and for many young voters, climate change. But what tops the list for you? What's going to get you off your couch and go to that polling station? We want to know, what's your number one election issue? Come on, Europe, have your say. Should schools be teaching kids about same-sex relationships? Is Salvini right to fine NGOs? And what's your number one election issue? And you know what to do? Pick up the phone. It is free. 00800 333 3702 is the number. We're waiting to take your calls. You can also email us at rawpoll@euronews.com. Use the hashtag #RawPolitics on Facebook or Twitter. Or indeed, get on Skype. Get off your couch, get on Skype and use the handle.
Join the debate. All right, let's talk about that topic in Poland. Should schools be teaching kids about same-sex relationships? Okay, this is, it's really cultural. I think it depends where you ask this question in Europe.
I guess so, but it also, like, I don't really see what's the alternative. Pretend it doesn't exist, or I understand for the governing party in Poland, this is a great political tool, but what's really, what is it besides really hate-mongering?
Well, the alternative that some people were saying is just not talk about it. Like parents,
well, I mean, there's campaigners, I think, like, it's not just in Poland. I was referring to England earlier on, and they feel that, kids in a primary school age, essentially 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, don't need to learn about same-sex relationships.
But if it's part of the sex education, then...
Many would disagree and say that even young kids need to recognise the kind of diversity of the society they may well live in.
Sure.
But I think this is a reminder of, we talk about kind of liberal Europe, and, you go to lots of cities, Brussels is potentially one of them. But there are also pockets, more than pockets, whole swathes, regions of Europe that actually aren't that liberal. There are Catholic conservatives we're seeing in Poland, or indeed strong Islamic Muslim communities in different parts of Europe who do not share the same kind of liberal values that Europe would like to say it espouses.
I think it's a wider issue, because in the clip, he also mentioned gender issues, I mean, so where do you draw the line? Do you not talk about women and men?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of complexity about how you do and what you teach and when you teach it. So what children talk about in the playground is a good reference about what they can absorb, and then you have to give instruction to frame that in a sensible way so that it can be discussed. So an 8-year-old is not capable of discerning many issues with great complexity compared to an 11-year-old. An 11-year-old can deal with a lot of these issues pretty much the same way as an adult. So the instructing the teacher to teach certain things, regardless of the subject, and at a certain time is important.
We will be continuing this conversation later on, and you can definitely join in and let us know what you think. So you know how to get in touch. You can call us for free. It's at 00800 333 3702, or write to us, rawpoll@euronews.com. And on social media, everywhere, you can use the hashtag #RawPolitics and look for us on Skype as well. Do join the debate. We're waiting for your call. Now, time for today's Raw moment. It comes from Dublin, where one of its election candidates has a new way of getting voter attention for his campaign pledges. Let's take a look.
Hi folks, I'm Ben Gilroy. This Friday, May 24th, I'm looking for your #1 vote as MEP for Dublin. There are several issues we have to take care of, and I'm the man to do it. A lot of people are asking why I carry a hurley stick. Folks, elections are no more about between left and right. It's between right and wrong, good and evil, and we are really troubled in this country with state corruption. That's one of the things I intend to take care of if I come back here with the office of MEP. That's going. And I'm going to Europe to get our money back. And I'll do it again. Bias media is going down. The choice is yours. Are you still going to be victims, or do you want someone to fight for you?
Okay, very quick Irish context there, please, Brian.
We know this guy. I think he made a mistake with the RT one at the Emirates National Broadcaster. There's still a lot of affection for that. He's on topic.
So it's common to see things like that, campaigns like that there.
I wouldn't say it's common to see that, but he's hitting the right themes if he wants to.
Hitting the right themes.
I mean, he is literally hitting the right themes. I mean, actually, it does stand out, right. So it's probably effective campaigning.
Maybe, did he get your attention? Okay, so we would like your views on everything we've talked about. So again, join us after this program on Your Call. We're waiting for you to get in touch. Use the hashtag #RawPolitics. See you then.